This musical disturbance, was it there? Real? Very interesting because it revealed a lot of things which I'll share as we come to the passage. It gave an answer to something which came like an appropriate example. How the mother leads us through everything. So now we are face to face with the real problem. Up till now, we believed that the problem is ignorance. And the remedy was getting rid of the ignorance. By ignorance, it meant the covering of the mind, body, life with which we identify and know as ourself. So, this is ignorance. And when we remove these coverings or go behind it, then we discover no, this is not the real self. The real self is something else. And by discovering it, we are free inside. And when we discover this real self, still the mind, life, and body will go their way. But because we have discovered the real self, fundamentally we are free. With regard to the mind, life, and body, when we go and ask the great masters who have shown us the way to get rid of ignorance, why is it so that despite having discovered such a beautiful, luminous truth about myself, I still have outer suffering? The answer is karma. Problem is yours. But doesn't matter. You live more and more in this part, and after when the time comes, drop this whole sheath of karma. It cannot now hold you back. So drop this sheath like a worn out garb and ascend to some higher heaven. Because when we discover this luminous double inside us, we also see that on one side there is the world draped in darkness, where things are indistinctly clear, obscurely clear, if one may say so. There are silhouettes, there are images, but not the real thing. And on the other side, we can sense intuitively or see, if the inner vision is open, worlds of splendor and light, and this is a natural attraction. So there is still the division between the world and God. But now we have discovered that ignorance is not the original problem. It is the byproduct of something else, which is the original problem. And that is inconscience, the mother of ignorance. Among many original contributions of Sri Aurobindo, this is one of them. It's not that inconscience has not been hinted. It's definitely like the supermind. It has been hinted in various places, like when Bible speaks of eternal hell or Indian thought speaks about patal. It's hinting at that. But yet, it's not brought to its fullness and the remedy, which we find in Savitri and in Sri Aurobindo's writings. So the real problem creator is inconscience. Ignorance is only a byproduct. Or if we look at from the other side, well, ignorance inevitably would lead to inconscient. That's the way consciousness is lapsed. That comes later. So when we go normally and ask a remedy for our problems, we are told, it's your problem. You have chosen to live in ignorance. I'll give you a way, a path, a technique, a method, and bit of my grace also. You practice it and you will get rid of ignorance, discover your true self, have the self-realization, and you are free. When we go to Sri Aurobindo and tell him the same thing, he would say, at its root, it's not your problem, it's my problem. This is a beautiful change, interesting change. Because human consciousness, with all its efforts, cannot conquer inconscience. So he says, at its bottom, it's my problem, and I am doing something to take care of it, to solve it. But it's a long process, you have to bear with it. That's what he would tell us. And there is something that we need to do, and what is that? Sri Aurobindo will reveal to us. So he doesn't pass it on to karma. Your karma. Because why do we commit errors? Why is the mind full of crookedness? Why people live in negativity? It's because at the bottom there is this inconscience which keeps throwing up random notes of error amidst beauty, and that's what we heard just now. Mother's voice, lovely mantras, music, But along with that, there were notes which were creeping in. It was a perfect example of how inconscient creeps in even in the best of things and sullies it. So that's where we continue. That what is the divine doing about it? Because it's very natural. If he tells us the problem is not just your ignorance, individual ignorance, you can get free from it, escape, all that is fine. But I have a bigger problem. And that problem is the inconscience lying at the base of the world. And till the evil is slain in its own home, there is no real spite for earth and humanity. There is a door of escape that is always available. We continue on page 449. He, the avatar who comes, this is his real work. He doesn't come to form a new religion, a cult, a sect, etc. We know in Sri Aurobindo's writing he has made it very clear. I am not here to found a new religion or a cult or a sect, but to open the way of the future. For those who are strong and ready, it needs strength, courage, because this is a solution he is giving us. We go to God with our solutions. Why don't you change the government? They are a bunch of monkeys. Maybe if you change God, it will be very nice. So governments change. Then after a while, no, not this one. Maybe you can change another government. Then we want a mix and match. But when we go to the divine with these solutions, say, wait. All this you have tried, everybody has tried. I have another solution. Are you ready? So strong and ready for applying this solution. So we have to present ourselves for applying for this application. He has seized life's hands. He has mastered his own heart. The feints of nature mislead not his sight. It's very important because otherwise we are misled and distracted by 100 things which come to draw us away from the real goal. But this is not how the avatar works. The feints of nature mislead not his sight. Inflexible his look towards truth's far end. Fate's deaf resistance cannot break his will. He has seen the truth, he has a work to do, and he will do it. Things which distract us. See, Sri Aurobindo, his own life is such a beautiful example, and in the life of every avatar we see it. When he moved away from the freedom struggle movement, a lot of people felt that he has escaped. Why has he gone away? This is the need of the hour. And he had seen through the feint, the mask, the disguise. He had seen that even if freedom comes, which it will come inevitably, it will not be worth it because man remains bound. So very soon this freedom will collapse back into the same rut. We will only exchange the white babus for the brown ones or the black ones or the grey ones. That's all we will do. We have done it. That's not the real solution. That's a temporary measure. It's important. It has its place. But that's not everything. That's not going to solve. Now Sri Aurobindo had seen that there is a deeper problem and that must be resolved. So here we have this beautiful thing. The feints of nature mislead not his sight. Inflexible his look towards truth's far end. Fate's deaf resistance cannot break his will. Because fate does not give way readily. It's like it doesn't heed, doesn't hear. In the dreadful passages, the fatal paths, invulnerable his soul, his heart unslain, he lives through the opposition of earth's powers and nature's ambushes and the world's attacks. So this is the real problem, and the avatar has to go through it in real earnest. This problem we have not even, people have conceived but not yet tackled. We see we have such a good exhibition on the various seers, Rishya. And we see the great sages. Among them, to name a few, Vishwamitra, so beautiful discoverer of the Gayatri Mantra. We have Durvasa. Whatever he said turned out to be true. Just to name, quite a few of these sages. But they had their own difficulty. Durvasa was so prone to anger. He just couldn't be quieted, and it's confirmed. Sri Aurobindo speaks. Bhrigu, he had the audacity to even kick Vishnu because he got very angry. Why I have been stopped and why? So even at that level, it's one thing to free oneself from ignorance, ascend into higher planes where you receive the mantra and the word of truth and the rivers of inspiration can flow to an extent, purify and reshape our mind. But that's not the solution. It's a temporary measure. It's important because these glimpses are the starters. Like when we go for food, we have starters. And starters give a hint how good the cooks are. So these are starters. The seers, the sages, the saints, they are starters. That's why Sri Aurobindo says this is not the aim of our yoga to become a seer, a saint or a sage. That's very good because we break free from ignorance. But the inconscient has not been conquered. First time we see this effort at conquest of inconscience. That is why it is such a difficult yoga for those who enter into it. And Sri Aurobindo spoke about it, that if the goal was to become a saint, seer or sage, many would qualify. But that's not the goal. It is something much more difficult. So he lives through the opposition and nature's ambushes. Look at Sri Aurobindo himself. Nature's ambush. Where does nature lay the ambush? And the opposition powers. Right inside his room they creep. Waiting for the hour. Hidden behind the tiger skin. Waiting for that moment. One small fraction of second and the ambush is there. And the Lord has a fracture. Can we imagine what kind of these forces are? We think we can handle them. It's not so simple. If it was so simple, there would be no problem at all. Right into Sri Aurobindo. And Sri Aurobindo says that I myself, I was so busy protecting the mother because that time the whole Second World War fumes had started and the mother's work was of this nature that I believed that they will dare not attack me. He had this conviction that they will not come near, but they were there waiting. So the avatar has to go through it. Look at the story of Rama. He is an avatar and he can alone decimate the entire army. And yet, when he is caught up, tied up with the Nagpash, or when Lakshmana, his own brother, is hit by Shakti, it's a real event. It's not just a confabulated thing. He could have died. It was a real problem. When Christ is crucified, coming to give love and hope to mankind. It's a real event. It's not something just a conjecture. So he has to live through that. The world's opposition. His spirit's stature transcending pain and bliss. Yet he remains above this. He fronts evil and good with calm and equal eyes. He was not drawn into it. There are some very interesting passages which when you read through evening talks, you just wonder. Somebody says during 1947 that there is on one side there was famine and on the other side there was slaughtering going on. Riots, we know how terrible, 47, there are films made on that. And they're giving this news to Sri Aurobindo and that this is what is going on. Now, normally we would expect, oh, is it? Sri Aurobindo would become serious or send his force. But very calmly he responds. It's like he has seen through all this. He is not deceived by these things. He is looking for the real solution, the lasting permanent cure. And it's amazing when we look at Sri Aurobindo's response during that time. He too must grapple with the riddling Sphinx. So Sphinx is a symbol for many, depending on the context, the symbol changes. It's a symbol also of the evolutionary force. It's also a symbol of unreal reality. Evolutionary force because it has the body of a lion, wings and the face of a woman. So it's a evolutionary energy which asks this riddle. It doesn't allow easily to pass through the evolutionary doorway, the passage. So he has to grapple with it. It's not that he simply can tell that you please set aside and I'll go march and along with me everybody will follow. If you do that, then you land up in the other soup like Moses had. He somehow by a miracle made people cross. And all these people who had the freedom didn't know how to use this freedom. So he had to give them the edicts. Look, this is not what freedom means. So this is a real problem. There is a very interesting story of mother when she says that, I was gazing towards the sea and I suddenly saw this huge serpent who guards the wealth. So he is the guardian at the door of all the wealth. And when he sees the mother, he does pranam, bows to her. So mother says, why are you guarding all this wealth? Why don't you let it for the sake of the world? It will be helpful. So he says, I can, surely before you I can move aside, but these fellows will kill me. Who are these fellows? They are the Asuras. They have appointed me. What to do? I have to do this task. It's not easy. I can't allow. Just like that. You see, it's even in Ramayana we have a story of Ahiravan. The guardian of the gates is Makardhwaj, Hanuman's own son, born out of his energy, sweat. And Hanuman tells him, but he says, I can't allow you to go past. I am appointed by my Lord. Who is my Lord? Ahiravan. Imagine what a paradox. Hanuman, his Lord is Rama, and his son's Lord is Ahiravan. So this shadow which stands is real. So he said, okay, give me a secret. How do I go past? Now, then why doesn't the mother destroy the Asuras? Then all of us will be destroyed. That's the other part. So she says, okay, give me the secret. Some mantra to go past. He says, there is one secret. Condition that they have put for me to give away. What is the condition? That the sexual impulse has to be mastered in the world. Mother says individually and for few human beings, yes. But I can't say that it has been mastered for the world. At least a representative sample of humanity. So she moves away. That means the wealth continues to be in the hands of those who are dark and corrupt. So we can't get just black money unless we work at this other end. We can get the black money, it will go into the black roots again. Somebody else will usurp it and there will be new accounts opened because the problem is so deep. So this is the real problem of the riddling sphinx. And plunge into her long obscurity. So what does he do? He goes deep inside. He has broken into the inconscious depths that veil themselves even from their own regard. It's like you feel that this is the end of the darkness and suddenly you plunge into greater darkness, into greater darkness, into deeper darkness because it is the shadow of the infinite. That's why Sri Aurobindo says don't try to even fathom it. It's not meant for everybody. It's only the avatar can do it. He is meant to do it. He says because the more you sound it, the more it will stretch endlessly. So what is the practical implication of this truth? The practical implication is some people believe erroneously that anyways I have to confront my shadow, so might as well I deal with my darkness and enter into the darkness. This is one kind of thought which comes in. It's one of the suggestions of the darkness. Darkness is anyways there. It's not something which we have to additionally manufacture. But if we try to deal with evil in that way, that let me, experience evil, because without this experience I cannot be complete. There are people who actually believe it. Then it will say, very good, come. And it's drag into abysses and abysses. No end. Before we even realize that we have been dragged and caught. So that's not the path, and that Sri Aurobindo will reveal to us a little later. He has broken into the inconscient depths that veil themselves even from their own regard. So evil lures like that. It looks like something very innocuous. We don't realize, but as the door opens, it's something like an endless thing. You see how people got addicted to cocaine. Initially, it was used in Coca-Cola. It's no more used now. I sincerely believe it's no more used. But that's how the name came, Coca-Cola. Nobody knew it's dangerous. People got addicted. It's one drug which can addict with a single dose. It doesn't need a second dose. Just snuff it once and you're hooked for life. So how does evil drag? Come on, yaar, it's just one thing. And nothing. What is there? Everybody tries. It's just a little experiment. And then it drags and drags and drags. So this is how it works. So the danger and the practical implications. He has seen God's slumber shape these magic worlds. He has vast the dumb God fashioning matter's frame, dreaming the dreams of his unknowing sleep. So, this of course is mother's experience. We have spoken about it earlier, and at another place we may speak about it. That when she went into the depths and depths and depths of the inconscient, she saw there a being sleeping, asleep. And he is the shadow of that being who sleeps above, in the superconscient sleep. And from his heart, there are emerging those purple rings, and each becomes a world and going towards creation. So, mother goes, and when she looks at him, he opens his eyes, he wakes up. It's very important. Inconscient suddenly feels the touch of the superconscient, wakes up, which is a very important thing. It begins to change, it accepts, it admits the presence of the divine. So this is one of our visions, 6 visions. I think it had come out as one of the issues. And vast the unconscious force that built the stars. He has learned the inconscient's workings and its law. So there are 2 laws that operate, and human beings are subject to both these laws. For a moment we can forget about karma. The one is the law of truth, Surya, Savitri, and the other is the law of Yama. Yama is the shadow of Surya. So every way is shadow. Surya is impartial. Suryo yatha sarva lokasya chakshu nalipyate chakshusha bahyadosha. Yama is also impartial. But Yama's impartial is the impartiality of darkness. It doesn't care. The saint or the sinner slays both. Claims an equal right. Whereas Surya's light and impartiality is not like that. There is a wisdom that operates in its impartiality. Everyone has to go through the evolutionary law, and if they can succeed, they go further. But Yama's impartiality is of a different kind. So here we have this other side, the inconscient's workings and its law. So what does it do? Its incoherent thoughts and rigid acts. Now comes the real problem. Why do we end up doing things which we know we should not do? That's why one of the most irritating things which people don't like to hear is, no, you do this, everything will be fine. So we know it. Tell me how not to do this. How to do this? This is the problem. The prayer of Duryodhana. That I know what is dharma and I know what is adharma. I know what is dharma, but I have no inclination for it. I know what is dharma, adharma, but I have no nivrati or freedom from it. This is the problem. Problem is not just knowledge. Problem is power. So how does it operate? First, the law of the inconscience, rigidity, habits. By habit everything works. Even when we drive a certain way every time and we are used to the same process, then by habit we'll go the same way even if one day we have to go the other way. So sometimes nowadays I walk without the scooter because Desiree home is nearby. And I have to step out of dispensary and I look for the scooter. Now the point is that there is no scooter. And I may feel one day, luckily not here, that oh my God, somebody has taken away my scooter and suffer an unreal suffering. Whereas it's just a habitual thing. So many things out of habit. So this is one of the things Mother speaks at length in Agenda, that these cells are conditioned. Matter is conditioned. Cells don't believe in grace. They believe in the doctors who keep telling them, no, you are sick. You cannot be cured except this massive surgery. You don't know, this is terrible cancer. They also give a very good name. Impressive name. Doctors sound very impressive when they use names. Lymphosarcoma, blastoma, grade 3 by A. That's very impressive. But if you say inconscient, what is this? Or habit, it's not impressive. Simply habit, it should be impressive. So Shrimananda is giving us inconscient. Then again, it's hazard wastes of impulse and idea. What is waste? See, this building is being erected. Lovely. It's going to come up. The new beach office. So what is happening in the process? A lot of chipping, dust, everything. Whoever passes by, whether we like it or not, it is going to smear. Hazard waste. One goes to Matri Mandir, on the way, the road is full of dust. It's very nice. It's got a nice view because it is sand with, it makes you feel like nostalgic about some past times with nice greenery around. But lot of dust also in the process. So it sticks to us of impulse and idea. Things we have thrown out, it's waste. We have discarded it, but still there. And it comes up again and occupies. The chaos of its mechanic frequency. This was the line that I remembered when this mechanic frequencies were coming between the nice music. I said, wow, wonderful. Here is one more example the mother has given us. The chaos of its mechanic frequencies. Actually, if we see, separate the two, it was very musical in the sense there was a frequency in it. Maybe some aliens trying to contact us. Interesting frequencies. It was at a regular interval, right? But this mechanic frequency was creating a problem. Because there was another something going on which was floating beyond all frequencies. So it's mechanic frequencies. It's random calls. It's whispers falsely true. Random calls. We have taken a very nice resolve in the morning. Suddenly, there is a call. Somebody calls. We have decided, okay, today, so many examples. One of them could be that I am going to read Savitri, or a time we fix for going to meditate at the ashram. Random calls. Suddenly somebody, hey, how about this nice movie running? Is it? Oh, great, come. We go. Random calls. And then the other example is also interesting. Whispers falsely true. There was a very interesting example of someone who actually heard a voice, the voice of Sri Aurobindo, to jump into the well. Obedient to the voice, he jumped. Obviously got hurt. Wrote to Sri Aurobindo, why did you give me this command? Sri Aurobindo says, but I never gave you this command. No, but I heard it. No, but I am telling you that I didn't give this command. No, how can it be? It's an inner experience, it must be true. Here, where even outer experiences are not often true, to rely on every inner experience and every voice and every vision as true. But it's so imposing, so real, so misleading, falsely true. It looks so true. Another very interesting, of course, he was a very fine person. Sri Aurobindo wanted to incarnate one of the 4 pillars of immortality, in which Sri Aurobindo wanted to incarnate the being of faith. But it's so dangerous because he started feeling a greater power and a greater energy and lost balance. So Sri Aurobindo advised him to stay in his hometown, arrange through his people so that he'll be looked after. Said, my protection and grace will be with you, but you don't come here because it's too intense a place. It'll be dangerous for him. But he would start the journey saying, no, I have heard your voice. And Sri Aurobindo would wire, please don't come, I am telling you not to come. No, but I have heard your voice, I have to come. We know it's the story of Tirupati. Very nice person. There are letters of Sri Aurobindo to Tirupati. And there are conversations where he speaks. And he couldn't help it because, he was hearing these voices and he believed that they are true. Sri Aurobindo has to wire, don't come now. Everything will be, because this is a very intense place. One just can't live here unless one is ready to constantly grow into sincerity or one is wonderfully open to the grace. So this is how things happen. Misleaders of the hooded listening soul. Because it's not just the soul, it is covered in mass, hooded listening soul. All things come to its ear, but nothing abides. So inconscient is like that. It's like it absorbs all things, but nothing really stays with it. Everything vanishes. All rose from the silence, all goes back to its hush. Its somnolence founded the universe. Its obscure waking makes the world seem vain. That's why when we stare at it, or when it stares at us, we feel, oh my God, it's terrible, this world is terrible. So much one has to do again and again repeatedly. One small little thing to have a victory. Arisen from nothingness and towards nothingness turned. Its dark and potent nescience was earth's start. It is the waste stuff from which all was made. So when we are caught up by despair, when we look at the world, see, there are practical implications of this. And we say there is really no hope. So many creations, they collapse into pralaya. Everything again goes back to the same rut. That means inconscient is whispering into our ears and we are listening. Our eyes are turned toward the inconscient. It is showing us, see, everything collapses because death will show this to Savitri. Exactly the same thing. What you want to change this earth? Look at the revolutions. Look at the great empire. They have all collapsed. So every time we feel a touch of despair, Mother says it is the tail of the devil. The rest of the devil is just waiting with his mouth open. It just touches us with the tail and we feel hopeless. So that's not the way. We have to immediately turn towards the light. Look at Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, their words. If they have given an assurance and a promise, that stands. All the evil of the world cannot stand. Where once Sri Aurobindo has said Tathastu. That should be the spirit. So here, into its deeps, creation can collapse. Its opposition clogs the march of the soul. It is the mother of our ignorance. This is the problem. Ignorance is not the original problem. And it's an easily solvable problem, relatively easily. As we have seen many rishis, seers, they have almost solved the problem of ignorance. But inconscience, nobody has even touched. Forget about solving it. It is the mother of our ignorance. So what is the solution for this problem? He must call light into its dark abysms. This is what the avatar has come to do. This is his solution. The mother would add, and love. Because basically that's what is missing there. Its cry is cry for love. So he must call this light. So what we should do when we are in despair or in the grip of ignorance? Do the same thing. Call the light and love of the mother, the grace of the mother. And not be misled by its feints of nature, by suggestions of despair. He must call light into its dark abysms, else never can truth conquer matter's sleep, and all earth look into the eyes of God. So how will he do it? Step by step. All things obscure, his knowledge must relume. Things there are there, like if we go into a dark place which has not been dusted for centuries, we see images, we see paintings, we see idols, but part broken, part dirty. So what is the work of the avatar? He must take it out, clean it, restore it. It's called restoring the picture. This is the work which one has to do, like with manuscripts, with idols. Restore the picture. Restore the idol. Clean the place. Put it in its right place, which means one has to know all this. What was the original place? If earthquake has come, everything is shattered. So this is so beautifully Sri Aurobindo uses the word relume. He has to once again see. It's not enough to discover it. Oh, in the past there was something so beautiful. Half broken image. It's not enough. It has to relume. That's why he gives us the secret of the Vedas. Before that also there were people who said Vedas are great. Swami Dayanand Saraswati, who first gave a very intellectual interpretation of the Vedas. Very, very nice. He tried to give it, but again, there were many things which were not understood, which he had his own reservations or his own intellectual way of interpreting it. Shankara also gave an interpretation of the Vedas. And there were a lot of people who believed the Vedas are great, the Vedas are great. But what does Sri Aurobindo do? He really relume. He restores the full picture so that nothing is left. What people were seeing at half picture. So even great scholars, Max Muller, of course, even Sayana, Panini, all these people, they saw the Vedas and say some verses are very nice, others must have been written by primitive people. Same thing we find with Max Muller. Some verses are very nice, very high. But Many others probably, they don't make any sense. Rishi is asking for cattle and sheep and goat and God knows cow and horses. Why would a Rishi ask for these things? He's saying something very weird. That, may the rivers pour on my head. What is special about rivers pouring on the head? And some of the things are totally absurd. Maybe some of them were even mad people. When somebody said that Indra's horses are dripping with ghee, maybe from that they started saying that India was a land where ghee and milk was flowing. It's not that ghee and milk. It is the Ghritam, the light, the illumined mind. And Indra's horses are those swift-footed, winged thoughts that climb to high heavens. So this is Sri Aurobindo relumes. He takes out all the knowledge which is buried in the inconscient. It has become waste. We know Vedas are great, but we cannot use it because we don't have the secret, not the key. So he gives the secret, and there is a very interesting thing about it, just a small little thing. We know about Sri Aurobindo and Sri Krishna and many things. We know about Sri Krishna placing the Gita in his hand. But there is something else Sri Krishna did with regard to Sri Aurobindo, which gave him the secret of the Vedas. Sri Aurobindo says, he gave me a new Nirukta, because of which I could reinterpret and see the Vedas in a new light. So he gave the key, and he gave him that now you open. So this, all things he has to do, relume. All things obscure. His knowledge must relume. That's why that was a part of the work. All things perverse, his power must unknot. Why are they there? Certain things which were very good in the past, good practices, but they are lingering on. It has to be unknot. They are like knots in the human, many things that had their place in the past, which continue wrongfully into the present, and they have to be removed, unknot. He must pass to the other shore of falsehood sea. We have seen this shore where we stand, and people are scared of this sea and they rush. But on the other shore, nobody has dared to step because that sea is full of dangerous and dark beasts. There is a very nice, interesting vision of Sahanadi, and she has written to Sri Aurobindo, and Sri Aurobindo has confirmed it, where she speaks about that sea into which she has entered, and there are full of dark beasts, dangerous beasts, and they are trying to touch her body, and somehow she is escaping, and suddenly sees at the other end Mother and Sri Aurobindo. And with their grace she reaches. I have another similar thing which is not documented anywhere, but Chote Narayanji himself had revealed to me that he had this interesting vision where he suddenly saw that there is a sea, and this side there are some people, and he hears Jarasandh is coming, Jarasandh is coming, and everybody is in panic, running helter-skelter, and he also doesn't know where to go. Suddenly he sees on the other side of the sea there is Mother and Sri Aurobindo, and he knows he has to cross the sea, but the sea is full of dark and dangerous things. So he doesn't know what to do. And he starts calling Mother and Sri Aurobindo, and suddenly the whole thing clears up and he runs towards them. So these are real things, that's how we have myth stories, but they are based on some inner experience. So he has to pass to the other side of falsehood sea. He must enter the world's dark to bring their light. Because somebody has to be there to receive it. He has to go there into the pit. The heart of evil must be bared to his eyes. He must enter the world's dark. Again, interesting things people don't ask in Ramayana. Why they had to do such a big drama? Ravana had come. Sita alone was capable of finishing him. Why she had to conceal herself and the whole drama of Ravana taking Sita? Even if Rama knew, surely they had such powerful weapons that Lakshmana could dry the whole sea. He should have just shot like laser guided missiles. Wherever Ravana is, find him and slay him. No, that would be a work half done. The story of Ramayana is actually an evolutionary parable. So Rama must march with an army of monkeys and cross the sea. See the bridge. Get into the den of the evil. That's why Hanuman is very wise. He could have taken Sita. He had found and nobody can do anything and he can fly. But Hanuman is very wise. He is strong, capable, but he knows this is not the solution. And that's why Sita refuses. She is, after all, she has the knowledge. When Hanuman says, "Come, mother, I can take you." She says, no. Lord will come. She has deliberately gone. So she has gone into the heart of darkness. Why? So that it draws the Lord right there. And that should be the real annihilation. He must learn its cosmic dark necessity. Evil also has its place. So we see in these parables, very interesting. What good did Ravana do? Ravana played a great role. It's there in one of Sri Aurobindo's poems, Rakshasas. So Ravana is an asura who has to subordinate Rakshasic ego, which is the ego of the kinetic man. Ravana is the ego of the intellectual. Intellectuals have tremendous ego. I know it. What does God know? He may be God, but I am an intellectual. Very qualified. What is God's qualification? People call him God. Actually, it's nothing. This way intellectuals can be very dangerous. Very dangerous species. Good to stay miles away. There is a true movement of the mind, a true intellect, the higher intellect, which is a different thing. But why Ravana has to be there? So in that poem, all the rishis, Atri goes and prays to Krishna. It's nowhere I have read this myth. It's only in Sri Aurobindo's poem. Maybe it's there in some legend, I don't know. And they say, Ravana has come. Ravana has come. All the 7 sages say that it's difficult for us to guide humanity. Please do something about it. He says, look, he has deserved his place. It has taken million years to create a Ravana. Million years he must rule. He says, my God, so much time. Is there no shortcut way? He says, no. So when will he end? Yes, he will end. When will he end? He has to end only by the human or the beast. It cannot be otherwise. So Ravana is an evolutionary stair between the Rakshasic man and the more illumined Sattvic mentality which Rama represents. So that's why Ravana is very smart, he knows it. So he says, and there's a beauty, the poem ends very beautifully because he invokes Rakshasi and Kali appears and she says, you have to fall but only to human or the animal. So that is the whole necessity of evil. It was useful at some point of time, so that's why evil is either good in the making or good in the passing. Things which had a utility. Alexander was needed at a point of time to create the sense of world unity, but it was a way of the Titan. Now there has to come by a different means. Maybe yoga will end up uniting the world. The other day I found that even Muslim clerics were saying, yeah, we are ready to yoga, but don't use the word Surya and Namaskar, etc. Doesn't matter. Any which way, maybe yoga will unite. After all, the word means unite. So we don't know. So now the unity cannot be the Alexander way. But at some point of time, the empires, the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, these empires were necessary to make the sense of unity. Otherwise, things would have fragmented. But now it is evil. Now when Genghis Khan goes, it's evil. So there we see the evil's dark necessity, cosmic dark. Its right and its dire roots in nature's soil. Even when somebody asked Sri Aurobindo, what is the use of Hitler? From the cosmic point of view, he said he had come to destroy the old world order. Nobody could finish it the way he has done. Another example of evil's cosmic necessity, 9/11. Bringing suddenly nations together because they realize that terrorism is not just one or two countries' problem. It is a collective problem. Even yesterday in UAE, They are saying, yes, it's everybody's problem. It's not just one country or two countries' problem, which is a very nice thing. Because it's so evil has to do this. It helps at another level to bring people together to see the problem correctly. So these are the extreme things which have to be thrown out and justify. He must know the thought that moves the demoniac and justifies the titan's erring pride and the falsehood lurking in earth's crooked dreams. He must enter the eternity of night and know God's darkness as he knows his son. So Titan's erring pride is justified by what? He knows this fellow. Who supports him? You see, goons, where do they get their support from? It's not because, they can be killed by strong people, but they are supported by, big mafia, political and money nexus. That's where they are confident. Titan's erring pride. It's an erroneous pride, but it says, I can conquer everything. Who will stand in my way? Even the gods I can set aside. Because he knows he draws his strength from the inconscient. That's why he will end up meeting the throne of God, where ultimately he is neutralized. But his erring pride is justified because he draws his strength from the dark inconscient. So all this is God's work. He must know God's darkness even as he knows his son. So we'll stop here and start in 10 minutes time.